Good evening, everyone. I think I am live. I believe I have rotated PDF correctly. There we go. Okay, it seems I'm live. Everything seems to be working correctly. I am recording the footage. Yes, good. And I am speaking. So, how are the audio levels for you guys? Let me try and grab some more dramatic music, actually, for a second here. Just to make sure that we are sounding good. It's not too loud, right? Sounds about right. Good. Chat says audio levels are fine, which means they're listening to Freljord music while looking at the Shurima intro, which, by the way, the Shurima intro looks pretty cool. They've leveled it up a little bit since the launch of the frickin' game. Much like with the level up animations for actual champions, which have gotten so ridiculously much better. Phoenixu, thank you very much for that super chat sticker thing. Hey, hello, how you doing? Anyway, welcome along to the Empires of the Ascended card review stream. So, I don't know if you've ever been along to one of these streams before, but basically, we're gonna look at all of the non-spell cards, and maybe also some of the spell cards, who knows, and we're just going to talk about, like, how is this art put together? What does it do? Like, how is the visual storytelling going on here? So point out some interesting facts and things about the artwork in this card game, because it has really good, nice artwork that I like to talk about. That's the general concept of what we're going to be doing tonight. And yeah, that shouldn't take any more than, 5 or 6 hours, maybe? Something along those lines. I'm so hyped to see you tearing Sivir's art down. Well, we'll talk about Sivir when we get there. But, yeah. I mean, there's going to be a few cards that I'm complaining about. Because there's always stuff that I'm complaining about. That's the brand. But we're going to be very happy about a lot of it, too. Don't you worry. There's a lot of really, really good stuff in here. Anyway, before we begin, I'm just going to hang out for a sec. And just, hello. Hi, how are you? Tonight, it is 4 p.m. No, it's not 4 p.m. for me. It's 8 p.m. We're going to hang out for a bit, just because YouTube notifications are... And usually people don't know that I'm streaming until like 5 or 10 minutes after I've started streaming, which is annoying, but we're just going to give people a chance to show up. Did they change Talia's voice? No, and they're not going to. At least according to what Riot have said, they are sticking with a new voice actress, although they are going to be changing the artwork on the card. 4 p.m. gang. Greetings from Spain. Well, hello. Greetings from Scandinavia. Did you add Viego's theme to your playlist? Good point. I should do that. It's a good theme. I think I have it. I think I've downloaded it. Get that on over there. We'll play that one next. New Jersey, Netherlands, Egypt. Oh, hello. Greece, Mexico. Portugal. South Africa, Jesus. And the Midwest of the USA. You people are all over the place. Some of you surely must be missing sleep to do this. Manager Arch, you sent a thing. Why did my alert box... Okay, it did pop up. Good. Hey, Scott, I'll just be looking in the background for a bit. Hope you have a good time with the stream. I think I will. And pillow fluffing. Yo, Sky, and greetings from Iceland. Are you planning to do the landmarks for this set as well? Or just units? Oh, good lord, there's so many countries. Holy shit. Oi. Well, I am glad you're interested to hear me blabber on about card art for the night. Right, we've been going, what, 5 or 6 minutes? So I think it's probably time that we, do the I should probably put these text boxes on screen since I put them on the thing. There we go. Dylan Mason, thank you for that super chat. Bought the Outer Worlds because of your playthrough and I love it. Are you ever going to continue it? Oh, maybe? Maybe. Portugal here, just wanted to swing by, say hi to my stream. Also, hello to you. Hello, Carlos Augusto Saraiva. I hope I'm pronouncing that moderately correctly. Anyway, let's begin not with any of the cards from Shurima, because Riot are silly, and instead begin with this dumb guy, Aphelios. And I think he got some followers or something, didn't he, as well? Which, but we'll start with him, because I've never actually talked about Dear Aphelios, and his card art. So we'll get to Azir in just a second. But Aphelios was added to the game sort of really late before this expansion came out, which is annoying. Anyway, it introduces us to one of the things we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. Like, something we'll just bring it up many, many times, but this is a Dutch angle. It's a term from film, which is when you tilt the camera such that the horizon line is no longer actually flat. So it's not a horizon line, but you tilt it on its side, so you get this tilted horizon line. And in film, it's often used to create a sense of instability, a sense of like, oh, things are strange, or there's drama, or a character is scared, or whatever. In the card art for Legends of Runeterra, sometimes it's used to create an instability in the viewpoint of the presumed viewer, but sometimes, or most of the time, it seems to be more about creating, manipulating the screen real estate, because you have this extremely elongated horizontal format for the card art, right? Like, this isn't even 16:9, it's like 16:10 or something along those lines. And so tilting the angle a little bit like that creates a little bit more space for the artist to use that isn't taken up by, for example, ground. And that's very, very commonly with Legends of Runeterra cards. You'll have this tilted angle just because it allows some with the composition. And Aphelios is no different. I think it's really more about opening up the sky so we can have the moon and we can have Alune outlined against the sky. And still we can see, oh, he's sitting on a cliff. And there's some stuff and things, but also moon, skies, stars, things. That's part of the composition of this image. We've also got something else that we'll be talking about a lot tonight, which is framing. So you'll notice that while we have a bunch of stuff going on in the background with the flags and the mountains and moon, sky, things, star, we have also this opening, like this, the corners of the mountains fall down here and climb up here, so we create this frame around the bright sky that creates this sort of relatively detailed, sparse area that Aphelios and especially Alune get to occupy, which sort of helps guide the eye and like makes, okay, this is the central subject of the image. Whereas if we'd had this incredibly detailed background all over the background, all over the background of our characters, they would stand out less from the scene that we're looking at. So it's one of those things, we'll see that a lot also tonight, like the way that a character is framed in the environment that they're sitting in does a lot to inform the way that we look at them. And you can kind of see that again here, that we have like the body of the poor Solari, this is the Sun Forger, I think, that Aphelios is about to murder. We have the body of the Sun Forger sort of creates this, blocks out basically sort of half of the card art area is just blocked out by him, but we can tell that he's not the subject of the image because most of his face really kind of is like sort of awkwardly cut off, and we know what's his body posture like. But Aphelios is highlighted by the light of Alune, and he stands out very strongly against the very muted background over here, which again is using contrast and color to create storytelling, specifically telling us who's the subject of this image, like who's doing the thing, who is important, who is the main character, and who is essentially a prop for the storytelling about the main character, which is that this guy definitely likes to murder old men. Because Aphelios is evil. He's evil. He's a bad guy. No, he's not. But yeah, you could conclude that if you wanted to, especially with his sort of dark purple color scheme. Right. That was Aphelios, released at the least, just the least convenient way for me when I like to try and review as much of the card art as humanly possible. Moving on to the actual frickin' Shurima cards. And who better to start with than our bird friend Azir? And I need some super chats. Reggie Kickass, who's your favorite champion card from the Shurima expansion? Oh, I don't know if you're asking about the mechanics or if you're asking about the artwork, because two different answers, I think. Like, I quite like, where the hell's Nasus? There's Nasus. I quite like Nasus's card art. Like, I like the dynamism of that pose. We'll get to that eventually. But in terms of mechanics, I think I really like Azir, just because I like attacking a lot and I don't like having to think. Okay, right. Where were we? Okay, so, once again, the way that the composition frames the character. And what's interesting about Azir's card art is that he's one of the few champions who isn't, like, just the only point of interest in his own splasher, in his own card art. Azir is actually kind of almost a secondary interest in this bit of card art because the card art is doing storytelling. What Azir is doing here is that he's in the process. You can see the ruins of Shurima in the background, like the old, dusty desert cities. This is pretty much like, this is him relatively recently, I think, after his ascension, beginning to reassemble the Empire of Shurima, and like rebuilding the grand city of Shurima, trying to get the Sun Disk back online, trying to reestablish his empire. So that's the storytelling of this image, is that this is Azir not triumphantly standing over hordes of attendants and being like the sun god, blah, 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 that he is in his final splash art, but being in the process of like, okay, well, shit, I fucked that up badly, a lot. Boy, howdy, I sure did fuck up all of the things. But let's try again with Shurima, maybe with less slavery this time, and that's the storytelling of the image. And that comes down to the general storytelling that comes through in his card art, where, like, we begin with him just beginning the assembly of Shurima, and now he's, like, in full swing, really rebuilding all of the things, and now he has reascended back up to being God Emperor of the thing, and hopefully he's not about to make the same mistake over and over again that he did before. So that's the storytelling of his progression of card art. And that storytelling progression comes through also in Nasus and Renekton's card arts. Like, all of the Ascended have this three-part story thing that's going on, which you can also see in their level-up animations, especially. Those full cinematic level-up animations that Riot decided to add to the fucking game. God damn it. So that's also there. Anyway, back to Azir himself. Here we have Azir being, like, he's not outlined, but he has these giant red streamers, right? And in this particular image composition, the streamers are all over the place. Like, they're being swept around by the wind, so they create these big red lines in the image, essentially, that draw your attention to Azir himself. Like, that's part of what frames him as the main character of the image, is that we literally have lines leading us towards him. If, on the other hand, these streamers had not been animated by wind, if they'd just been hanging down and been really sort of calm and relaxed, he would be less central to the image. He would dominate less space in the image. So instead we have this half and half split between Azir taking up like about half of the card art and his magic taking up the other half of the card art. So you get this split in attention between like what's important to the image, whereas this guy and the thing that he's doing. These are the important things in the image. Those are the things I need to be looking at and paying attention to. Let's see. His lore imply. Okay, let's talk about the Azir thing, because people over on my Shorts channel were in my frickin' comments being like, "But Azir wanted to free the slave." Azir's mistake, and this is the theme of his story. Azir is like, I should probably free the slaves. That would probably be a good thing to do. I'm the Emperor of Shurima, and I'm supposed to live for my people, so freeing the slaves is probably good. But if I tried to do that, then I wouldn't get to be Emperor anymore. That wouldn't be good. That would suck, and then someone else would have to be emperor and do the... Maybe I'd have to lead a rebellion or something. That sounds hard. I don't want to do that. So instead, let's not free the slaves at all and just pretend like we're not going to do it ever for years and years and years and years and years, and then my best friend, who I love, is going to hate me because I keep promising him, oh no, totally, definitely, I will get to it, sure, it's very important to me, I promise you, and he's going to get pissed off, and then at the very moment of his ascension, when, like, he's most sure that I can do this without any bad consequences, I can free the slaves, and I can still be emperor, and I can ascend, and the empire will be fine, and I get to be emperor, and I don't have to sacrifice anything, and then he says, yes, my friend, I'm going to free the slaves. And like, why are you looking at me like that? Oh no, you have a dagger. Oh fuck! And then the entire empire of Shurima crumbles and falls apart because Azir prioritizes his own power over doing what's right for his people. Like, that's why he does all of the things that he does, is that he doesn't want to give up being emperor. That's the theme of his story, which is why when he's revived, he ascends finally. He becomes worthy of ascension when he decides to put someone else's needs above his own. When he finds Sivir bleeding out, nearly dead in his tomb, and saves her life, that is when the Sun Disk is like, oh, okay, you finally figured out, like, the basic thing of being a ruler, which is, take care of your people, you dumb moron. Okay, you can ascend now, do it better. That's the theme of the story, is that he needs to learn that it's not all about him all of the time, that there are things more important than him, and his power, and his hereditary position, and his right to rule. That's his story. That's what it's about. He fucks up and destroys Shurima by being a stupid idiot who doesn't prioritize the well-being of his people above all else. Anyway, so I don't have a lot of sympathy for Azir, like pre-ascension, like, because he fucked up. He fucked up everything and destroyed the empire and, like, removed water from the desert and so please, nobody in the comments be like, but he wanted to free the slaves. No, he didn't. He didn't want to free the slaves. He wanted to remain emperor and still have Serath be his friend, and he wanted to ascend, and he wanted, like, to not sacrifice anything for the stuff that he kept saying that he definitely, totally, for real believed in. So, anyway, moving on to his second level up splash art. Here, we have, again, framing going on. We have all these floaty sandstone blocks as he's rebuilding the palace at the capital of Shurima. But notice how those floating stone blocks are paced out. Lots of floating blocks, lots of floaty stuff all the way around here. But right next to Azir, really not that much. We have this frame being created again, where there's, like, this relatively uncontested space where he gets to be the central, unchallenged character, which is what makes him the central character of the image. Again, imagine if, like, we'd had stones floating in front of him and behind him and all around him. He would sort of like, oh, there's a huge mess here, but I think there's a guy in there. I can't really tell. But because the artist keeps the space around him clean, we get, oh, no, hello, central main character of the image. I can spot and identify you almost immediately. Right. Was a super chat. That moment when you wanted to free all the slaves as your homie's birthday present, but then you get pushed off the holy frisbee. Yeah, I mean, sucks for him, but it's his own damn fault. It's easy to say just do the right thing when doing the right thing has severe consequences. Yeah, that's how morality works, is that you do the right thing even though it's hard. That's how you get to be the good guy, is when you do the right thing even though it's hard. If you don't want to do the right thing because it's hard, you're not the good guy. You're like, at best, an NPC who's not interesting to the story. Stories are driven by people who are willing to do the thing even though the thing is hard. Like, that's what makes a hero, you know? Like, oh, help me, Superman. Well, I mean, I would, but it's hard and complicated, and it's like, it's just easier to let you fall down and die. Sorry. Anyway, where was I? Serath did nothing wrong. No. Serath did a lot of wrong things. He did a lot of, oh boy, Serath is not, like, the good guy necessarily, but it's like, he had a reasonable grievance. And, like, Azir is responsible for poisoning him against Shurima as a whole. So, you know, like, it's... Xerath is not the good guy. He's, like, in the lore right now, Xerath is basically trying to become Azir 2.0. Like, he's trying to take over and become Emperor and be like, yes, power! Yes, I want power! I'm a power-hungry monster. Because, again, that's the theme, is that Azir turns Xerath into a monster by, like, refusing to be a ruler properly. Like, Xerath is acting exactly like the Emperor that Azir taught him to be. Right? Like, he becomes literally an embodiment of power for the sake of power, which is why he's a good antagonist to Azir, is because that's the thing that Azir should really not become, eventually. Anyway, this is not what we're talking about right now. Speaking of framing, here's an interesting framing of a character, because in this card art, Azir is tiny. He's itty-bitty. He's this little 2-inch tall thing hovering in the center of the image. That's not really... We don't really get to see his face. We don't really get to see much about, like, his disposition or his posture. The image is not really mostly concerned with his body, but he is still the massive main character of the image, which is to say that everything in this image, all of the things, revolve entirely around him. He is the hub of the wheel of what's happening here. Hovering in front of the little sun disk, which is in front of the very big sun disk, we have this perfect symmetry that's created where you have all these, like, lines that just lead our eyes, all these arrows that point upwards towards where Azir is in the image. So he becomes this massive center of a thing that's much bigger than himself, which, again, bit of the theme of the storytelling is that he has rebuilt his empire. And now he once again is Captain God Emperor for the whole thing, hopefully doing better this time. But the symmetry in this image is what really creates this, like, complete centralization, because Azir is the only asymmetrical thing in this picture, aside from the clouds. Everything else, there's symmetry on both sides, and only Azir, sort of, he has this pose, and he has, like, his streamers, and he's the one who breaks symmetry, and he's at the center of the image, and that's what centers him so hard in the image. Plus, the whole thing, he's literally illuminated from behind like he's God. Like, it's very, very much, like, the whole image is about this guy hovering at the locus of tremendous power. And the framing is entirely about that, which, again, it's about the storytelling through the card art. Right, the super chat. I was thinking a fix, a save for the female Minotaur card could be Riot saying she's a half-breed, half-human, half-Minotaur. I mean, sure. I don't think that's a fix, really, because it's a character design issue, not... It's not an issue of the biology of Minotaurs, it's a character design issue. It's... They could do anything. Like, they don't have to make up an explanation. We'll get to that once we talk about her. But you don't have to make up an explanation for it. You can just design the character differently. And make up an explanation afterwards. Anyway, Azir's Sand Soldiers, and I'm excited to spam these motherfuckers. I want to make some goddamn Azir decks and just focus on getting to level 3 as fast as possible. That sounds fun. Have you seen the Emperor's deck cards? I mean, Jesus Christ, the power in those things, but getting there is probably going to be tough. So, once again, we have a bit of storytelling going on here, which is first that Azir's Sand Soldiers are all just all the same. They are a faceless horde, essentially, of characters and creatures, and we get that in repetition, where each of the Sand Soldiers is wearing the same gear, they have the same pose, they're doing the same thing, so you get this sense of repetition, giving us this idea of, okay, horde of mind-controlled Sand Soldier creatures, whatever. And then we have the main character of the piece, ostensibly, which is the main Sand Soldier, who's the one who's like, okay, what do they look like? They're like this. And one of the things that's being done is take a look at the saturation of the colors between this guy right here and his, like, immediate neighbor, right? Take a look at the contrast and take a look at the saturation, because this guy has much more saturated colors. He has much more contrast, whereas the guys in the background are so overlaid with this white haze, almost. It's almost as though there's a little bit of a dusty... like a little bit of dust in the air between him and the other Sand Soldier that makes him stand out as the only character with like these really like deeply saturated, like really clear colors, and everything else looks a little bit blurry, everything else looks a little bit far away, everything else looks a little bit like, this is not the main character of the image, main character of the image, not the main character. Like, so the color and the contrast here is being used to, without separating him from the other characters in terms of design, we get the sense of, okay, this is the main character of this particular art. This is the main Sand Soldier. If this was an action scene from a movie, the camera would be following this guy, right? Not these guys, it would be following this guy in particular. And again, that's just all about how they're using color and contrast. And the spear also kind of helps because this basically cuts the entire image, not quite in half, but like the third down here is essentially cut off completely. So the spear itself is the biggest thing in the image. It's the most dominating feature. And the spear is attached to this guy. So once again, main character of the image. Which again is also a bit of the storytelling, is that the thing to be worried about with the Sand Soldiers is not like they're going to fall apart. They're sand, they're ephemeral, who cares? But they're going to do their damage. Big pointy stick goes ow. So storytelling there, telling us a little bit about how to relate to this character, which is like, okay, he's crumbling to dust, he's sandy, probably not going to stick around, but big pointy spear, go ow. Important thing about this guy is big pointy spear, go ow. Oh, Mira Robin, thank you for that super... You didn't say anything, but thank you for the tip. That's very kind of you. I should pay attention to... Oh, thanks for the stream, loving the shorts channel, keep it up. Well, thank you, Babang Show. I think you missed Aphelios' followers in the landmark. Oh, right, he had followers. That's true. Right. Okay. He's in Call of the Mountain, right? Okay, could someone tell me what were the specific cards that Aphelios launched with? Because I know that he has followers, but I can't remember. I remember the landmark. I can at least filter for that. Which was the Veiled Temple. And Necrit already has a whole video like going over all the little details that are in the Veiled Temple. But the landmarks are actually an interesting case study when it comes to League of Legends, because they're some of the few bits of like full-fledged art that isn't just spell art, where characters are not the main characters at all. Like with the main character of the thing is the environment that the characters occupy. And so you get a very different approach to the things that we've talked about, like framing, color, aesthetic, like the way that the composition is framed. Because Aphelios is sorta here, and Alune is here, because we're in the spirit realm, in this temple thing. They're there, but they're not important. They're just like, oh yeah, they exist, whatever. But the main character of this image is this, whatever the hell this thing is. A lunary space symbol thing with the moon and the half moon and the thing. This is the main character of the image. And the way that we know this is because it exists as this high contrast object, pretty much in the center of frame, more or less, against this very light, bright background. So it becomes this, like, this silhouetted thing almost that stands out in the centerpiece, and it also has these streamers of red color draped all over it, which is like, oh, it's a thing that's important because of decorations, yes. That sort of make this the central feature, not necessarily a central character, but the central feature of the image. And then like we have secondary features of the image, which is like the bird and the bull. And then we started, oh, okay, and then, hey, there's some characters here. And the function of the characters in this image is not so much to be characters, but to create a sense of scale. Because the human brain is very, very good at creating a sense of scale against humans. Like, you know how Reddit includes a banana for scale? This is kind of the same thing. Human included for scale to give you a sense of how big this temple is. It's like, oh, the humans are tiny, which means the temple is huge. Which is a technique that you see all over romantic painting, like the romantic era paintings, where like we want this environment to be big and huge, and we want like the majesty of nature to be visible. We'll put tiny little people in our images so that the people look tiny and the environment looks huge and big. And that's the function of Alune Aphelios, is just to make the whole temple look bigger. Just to make the whole place feel grand and feel kind of overwhelming. There's these huge statues, tiny people. Someone comments, by the way, that this thing looks like the sun disk. Yes, and that is because there is a distinct connection between Targon and Shurima. Ascension, essentially, like, the Shurimans essentially figured out how to use the sun disk to create ascensions that are similar in kind, maybe not quite as powerful, but similar in kind to Targonian ascensions. Like, if you climb to the top of Mount Targon and you're judged worthy, blah, 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 something, celestial aspect, and now you have magic power and you can do stuff. And the Shurimans figured out how to sort of do the same thing, but, like, customize it. So that we have the big sun disk, and the sun disk will give us all ascensions, and then we'll turn into animal people, and then thousands of years later we'll all become Darkin and try to destroy the world. So that worked out great for everyone once again. Good job, Shurima. But it's connected to the same aesthetic. So you'll see little aesthetic connections between Targon and Shurima all over the place because they draw their power from some similar sources. Just in case you're wondering what that was all about. Anyway, what were Aphelios' followers? Right, the flight. It's the creatures. So here again, same thing as before. We have a human here. Alune is there, but she's mostly there for scale. She's there to be tiny so that we can look at the bird and go, oh, very large, big bird. This bird is huge. The tiny person, large bird. So it embodies this grand celestial power. So that we really get a sense of overwhelming scale. And again, you can see the image is creating a framing around the bird. Because Alune is like here staying on this bed and she's got the background behind her and things like that. But the bird itself is, like Azir in his like level 2 art, is being sort of respected by all of the other features. We have all this floating debris. We have these little rocks flying around and the bird like blasting its power all over the place. But no rocks floating in front of the bird. No rocks, like no background, no features in the background. We only have like the grand cosmic power that it represents, which again creates this space for this character to be the main feature of the image, and then Alune as a secondary character in the image. I think we also had another, the Sky Shadows. So it turns out that this one of Aphelios' weapons is based on like starfish, which is like this very Avatar The Last Airbender kind of thing. These little starfish creatures. And there's an interesting framing going on here where we have this, like, clearly this is not like a pool of water, but you have this rippling in the surface of this mirror or whatever it is that creates the feeling of a pool of water, which is sort of very well put together, really. And the main thing that outlines these as the main characters of the image is, first of all, they're the only things in there, but it's also the light. We have this central light source of the crescent moon in the middle of the image, and then everything else is sort of structured around that with these like concentric circles of the ripples, sort of creating a natural framing of the image with these two bright things with the stars and stuff inside them becoming the main characters in the center of the thing. We don't have much of a sense of scale here. Like, we have planets floating around, but no human being in there. So we don't know how big these fish would be relative to Alune. Presumably big, because cosmic, they have galaxies inside them, as presumably large, but it's less of like an explicit framing of a character against the grandness of this thing. Which is opposite to what we see with the fangs. Again, Alune is here just to be tiny, so that the fangs are very, very large indeed. Big space cat with his teeth, who's gonna carve up the Solari for being dicks. Or something. And interestingly here, Alune does get a frame. Like, we can see the body of the cat and then like the sheer mountainside or whatever, along with the statue here. It creates this little subframe within the image where it's like, oh, hey, there she is. Hello. There's a character here who is probably important to the story of the image, but the vast majority of the real estate in this image, like just all of this, like from left to right, it dominates the image just by sheer size. So we get, okay, this is the main character. This girl's important, but this big thing, which is taking up all of the space and is highly, like, illuminated with bright light here, while Alune is a little bit more in shade, that's probably the main character of the piece, which is Space Knife Cat creature. Let's see, should be just one more. Cloven Way, right, the Cloven Way. And this is the first time Aluna actually gets to have a readable facial expression in one of these, but still she's being used here to create a sense of scale. She's not, like, creating scale by being tiny in the image, but we are at her level now. Like, compare and contrast with where she is in the Fangs, right? Like, relative to the viewer, she's far away. She's, like, all the way over there. She's tiny. She's doing something. We don't know. What's up with her? I don't know. She's over there doing moon stuff. So we don't really get access to her. But with the Cloven Way, finally we get to see, okay, there she is, and we're on her level, and we can sort of identify, her and us, same size. We can see her, and it's like person, and then you look up, and then the background, you get like all of the skies and the stars. You get this thing of like almost indeterminate scale, because it's like a moon hovering over it, literally like a moon hovering over everything. So she's still here to create a sense of scale and to create a sense of identification for the viewer, because she's a person, and we recognize a person in the image, but she's still there to sort of reinforce how big this damn thing is. I don't think it works quite as well as in the other images, frankly. Like, I think if she had been much tinier in the image, like if she'd been shrunk down to only occupy this space right here, we'd have a greater sense of this thing just being absolutely astoundingly massive. But I think that's what the image is attempting, at the very least. But notice that she's mostly kind of not very highlighted by the light. Like, her face is kind of in shadow, and she's not like, she's not really saturated or highlighted with a lot of light. She has edge lighting, but not really light. But this guy has a ton of light on his big metal space goat features or whatever, and he's very saturated. So again, the color contrast and the sheer contrast of the image is being used to make this the main character of the image, even though there's a human character right here for us to relate to. Right. Was there more others? I think that was all of Aphelios' followers, wasn't it? I think it was. So let's go back to Shurima, which is the thing that we actually here to talk about. He also had some spell cards and stuff, I know, but... moving on to Leblanc. And I really like, first of all, Leblanc has gotten a little bit of a character design update. So, Leblanc in the game right now is, she's essentially, like, the thing I like about her character design is that she's designed after a stage magician. Like, that's basically what she's supposed to look. She has this big flashy outfit and, like, giant collar and weird rope bikini thing that, like, whatever the hell she's wearing. Like, this weird thing that she's wearing. It's all designed to be very ostentatious, very out there, very like, hey, look at me. Because that's the whole thing about her, is like, she's the deceiver. It's like, you look at her and you're just like, oh, look at that brightly colored weird lady in the strange costume there. We shall chase that thing. And then she's gonna stealth away and do the deceiver thing. And it's not a perfect character design. I wish that there would be more of a contrast between the bright illusionary image that she projects and then her real self, which hides out and does things. But they've done a little bit of an update for her here in Legends of Runeterra. We don't get a full look at her new costume in either of her splash arts, but it's like they've done away with most of the having the titties hang out and not being very dressed at all, and she's gotten much more dressed up. But she's also gotten dressed up in a different aesthetic, rather than being like a stage magician, rather than being like I am on the stage doing the magic tricks for people. She looks more to me like she's dressed like an underground mafioso lady. Like, she's more like a ruler, a power holder, specifically. She's dressed in the aesthetics of power, rather than being dressed in the aesthetics of performance. And that's, like, it's a different choice, but I think it works better with LeBlanc as she's conceived. Like, because when LeBlanc was originally added to the game back in the day, we didn't have most of the Noxus politics that we do nowadays. She was just like, haha, I am the stage magician, deceiver, ancient, baha, do match. Like, she was more of a sort of cartoon villain back in the day. Now, Noxus has all this subtle power politics with the Black Rose and the impersonations, and LeBlanc, like, trying to contain Mordekaiser, and Swain is like, no, we shall do Empire and things, and I don't like the Black Rose. Like, there's much more subterfuge, there's much more subtlety, there's much more power dealing, so this character design to me works better for that, even if I do kind of miss the sort of stage magician thing that she used to do. So, again, let's take a look at the framing, because this is a very busy card. Like, we have characters over here, and we have characters over there, there's lots of stuff going on, and hands pointing in every direction, and papers, and, like, quills and stuff, but notice how the entire image, like, pretty much nothing gets to overlap Leblanc, like, nothing gets to be in front of her. She's only, like, overlapped a little bit by the arm of this person out here, but she mostly has, like, completely uncontested space in the frame. She's also framed by this throne that she's sitting on, which we'll get back to that in a second, and she's highlighted by the light. Notice how the other prominent characters in the image, like this lady here, this guy over here, or the characters in the background, none of them are really highlighted. Like, you don't really get to see them the same way that you get to fully see Leblanc. Like, there's a guy back here, you can barely see his eyes. This guy, oh, he's cut off. That guy, face cut off by the color of the other guy. This guy's not looking at us. This lady is like, we sort of see her from the side, but she's completely in shadow. Only Leblanc is fully illuminated, and only Leblanc's features are fully visible, which makes her, again, the central character of the image. And this whole thing, to me, like, this entire image kind of has the... kind of has the nature of a Renaissance painting. Something like, let me think of, I'm trying to think, it's a little bit Caravaggio-esque. If I can find a good version of, oh, The Calling of Matthew, that's the one I'm thinking about. Let me see. Can I find a decent size of this somewhere? Thank you, Google. So, notice the color aesthetic here, right? Like, we have this very bright light and, like, these bright illuminations, but these really dark shadows all over the place. Like, this is... It's called something specific. It has a specific art history name that I can't remember. But this is a Caravaggio piece from the Renaissance, and Leblanc's art kind of has that same... It's less hyper oversaturated, but... it has kind of that same vibe with these characters, like, people are pointing in one direction and the other. There's clearly stuff going on. But the light is being used to highlight the central characters. Like, it's... yes, Chiaroscuro. Thank you, Avalon Knight. That's the thing. It kind of has that feeling. It's not... it's digital art, so it's not... doesn't work quite the same as painting, but it has that same kind of feeling. That's kind of the thing I instantly associated this with. Like, this looks like one of those old Renaissance paintings with a lot of people arguing all over the place, and then some saint is highlighted in the middle going, ah. That's kind of the feeling I got from Leblanc here. The interesting thing, remember how we talked about storytelling in splash arts with Azir? Like, we go from building the Shurima city to being the God Emperor. There's storytelling happening with Leblanc as well. But specifically, we get here what seems to be like, notice the rose sigil here, right? So this is the table that Leblanc was sitting at just in this image, same rose sigil. And we look down into the reflection of the table itself, and all the people around the table, all of them, everyone is Leblanc. So, like, that's the storytelling here, is like, Leblanc is everyone, Leblanc is everywhere, as she screams in her level up, animation. And that's part of the storytelling, again, of what Leblanc is doing in Noxus nowadays, is that she occupies this nebulous... Like, she's not necessarily one specific person, she's everyone and everywhere. She can take on any identity that she wants, and it's impossible for her foes to know who Leblanc really is. And that's the storytelling that's happening here, is that we have this scene where we think we know what's going on. These people are arguing, like, this guy is saying the one thing, and this lady does the pointing thing and says, no, we shall do the other thing, and this guy's, ooh, I'm not sure about what the thing is that we shall do. And we have an old man and a black dude and, like, a lady, like, man with a mask who might be a Damascian mage seeker for all we know. It's like all these very different people, and they are all arguing. They have different viewpoints, except, no, they don't. There was never an argument here. There was never different people here. There's never, like, everything you saw in that previous image was just staged. It was just a show. Because what's actually happening is there's only Leblanc, there's only her plans, and everything you saw because she wanted you to see it. That's the storytelling here, is that Leblanc manipulates the image of a scene, and you don't get to know what's real. And that's why she's breaking the fourth wall a little bit. Because here... she's staring directly at us. Like, we look at this and she's staring at us. It's just like all of this people arguing, whatever. Who cares? She's looking at you because you're the one being manipulated here. And here she essentially breaks the fourth wall because she's looking down, but again, she's not looking at her own reflection, really. She's looking out at the viewer and saying, haha, fooled you. It was all Leblanc all the time, astronaut meme. Which I think is very cool. Like, it's a very cool way to incorporate that aspect of the character, where, like, her whole thing is gaslighting people and making them doubt their own reality in order to manipulate them emotionally, and that works really well. Like, that's a very cool idea. And it also has the other consequence of, like, here we have a very clear image, right? Like, here everything can see all the characters, everyone's clear, we have this very sort of static image of what's going on, but when we get here, because we're looking in the reflections of the table, all of a sudden everything is sort of smeared out, and it's like, oh, there's this face kind of just floating there. Is that attached to a person? And there's a LeBlanc face, kinda, and there maybe one there. And like, it's all of a sudden it's much more hazy and dusty, as though you're seeing like these Fata Morganas hovering in front of you that are maybe real and maybe they're not real. Like, so even the storytelling of the image, just the way that the framing and the reflective nature of the table is being used to create this sense of unease and uncertainty of like, holy, what's going on? This disorientation, as opposed to the complete clarity of the previous image. Because here LeBlanc is at the height of her powers, so of course, this is when you lose the most of your certainties about what's going on anywhere. Very good storytelling. I really quite like the LeBlanc art. It's very well put together. Right. Oh, super chat. Fausto Grillo. Gotta go, so I'll ask now. Do you think Cillian will also get some sort of redesign, or will he continue to have a huge clock on his back for no reason? Well, as far as I remember, Cillian is... he's right here. There he is. He looks slightly different. Like, they've added, like, some Shuriman-looking golden discs and stuff to him. He doesn't have his clock, but he's there. That's Cillian, or LeBlanc. Maybe it's LeBlanc, who knows? But it looks like Cillian, anyway. So he's not much redesigned. Like, they've kept pretty close to his canon design. Anyway, my girl Lissandra. One of the better characters in League of Legends lore, by the way. She has some really fun stories. If you want to get into League of Legends lore and reading it, Lissandra's stories are a great place to start, because, like, the Eye in the Abyss... some of the stories she has about, like, how she's trying to contain the Watchers, very, very good. Fully recommend. But Lissandra is interesting as a card. Certainly her level 1 is. Because, where the fuck is she? Like, what is this scene? Where is she? What's she doing? What's happening here? There's ice, I guess, and she's touching the ice, and that makes magic happen. This, like, it's a very indeterminate space. We don't really know where she is or what she's doing. We just know there's black ice everywhere, and she is in the center of it all, riding on top of a wave of black ice. Which is curious, because, like, in her level up, we get much more of a distinct sense. Like, this looks like the Howling Abyss. She's summoning a bunch of frozen thralls. We know where she is and what the space is, but this is much more of a sort of indeterminate space. And I don't know if it's specifically storytelling, like that she's calming down a Watcher, like it's a Watcher's eye that we're seeing in the background here. It could be. But one of the things that Lissandra is a dreamwalker. Like, one of the things that's important to her story is that she walks in dreams, and she infiltrates people's dreams, and she takes people's feelings and emotions and she feeds them to the Watchers in order to calm the Watchers down and keep them sleeping just a little bit longer. And so for me, like, the indeterminate space here, I kind of read it immediately as like, oh, this is someone seeing Lissandra in a vision as she's feeding their emotions to the Watchers in the deep, trying to contain them just a little bit longer. Because that's Lissandra's whole thing, is that she does not want the Watchers to wake up, because, uh-oh, that's gonna end me. I don't want to end. That would be bad. The eye from the Rise cinematic, it might be, like, it could be a Watcher's eye. I don't think it's, like, I think we have, like, the narrow vertical slit, so it's probably a Watcher's eye, but it's indeterminate. Like, the whole point of the image is you have all this, like, strangeness going on, so it's hard to see what's going on. So I interpreted it as a dream image, like she's walking in dreams here, which is what she's doing to keep the Watchers from rising. Whereas once we get to, for example, the Frozen Thralls, and especially the Watcher itself having finally broken free from the Howling Abyss, that's a little bit more along the lines of... Because, like, what Lissandra is preparing for is a final confrontation with the Watchers. Like, she's trying to keep them contained as much as possible, and she's trying to gather forces and gather power to resist them once they finally break out of the Howling Abyss. Like, hoping against hope that maybe she can keep them back. And that's kind of what this reads as to me, is like Lissandra calling on all of the forces that she has, and everything that she's capable of doing, because, oh shit, uh-oh, bad things are happening! But we'll get to that art in a bit. Once again, contrast is being used here. Lissandra has this, like, pure sheer black armor dress robe thing that she's wearing, and that contrasts her nicely against the backdrop of the frame here, marking her out as the central and only real feature in the image. It's like hard to mistake her for anything but the main character. Notice again, Dutch angles. It's not quite as obvious as it was in Aphelios' art, but the horizon line is like going something like this. Like it's tilted, which again, partly to create more space in the image for the artist to work with, but here also used to create this sense of unease, this sense of like, oh shit, I am sort of destabilized and things are strange and weird. Contrast that with her level 2 art, where there's no Dutch angle in sight. We have this rock solid, boom, flat horizon, and then we have Lissandra in the center of the image. First of all, she's highlighted, which is again a thing that this card art uses very, very frequently. Is the main character is just going to be the one that has the light on them, and she has that here. But she's also, again, like we saw with Azir in his level 3 art, where he's like the center of this symmetrical image, like everything seems to kind of revolve around him. Something similar is happening with Lissandra, where she's like dead center of this image. She is the center of the image itself. And the background, like she's walking down some, I don't know, bridges. Like this looks like the Howling Abyss to me. Like the bit under the bridge where there's a walkway. That's kind of what it looks like to me. But you have this symmetry in the image of like the environment, which she's clearly walking down the center of whatever this passage or hallway is. But then you have all this asymmetry and chaos going on around. Like you have these frozen thralls breaking out of the ice and ice flying everywhere, and it's like, monster. Like they're doing all this shit in the background. But Lissandra is stuck still. Like there's no sense of her like swinging her arms around or being confused or chaos around her. She's completely still. You have this sense of control from her posture, like that she has these very specific hand gestures, and that her arms are incredibly stable, like she's doing this grand gesture of power. Whereas everything else in the scene is like, you get the sense that there's noise, and that there's chaos happening, and particles flying around and everything. And then she's this beacon of complete control and power in the center of it all, which like works really, really well. She's about to T-pose. I mean, she kind of is already T-posing a little bit. Like, I think it could probably be a little stronger if she had a symmetrical posture. Like, if instead of her arms being in different postures, that she actually had, like, was raising both of her arms out to the side in exactly the same way, I think that would highlight and accentuate her control over the image a little bit. But it's like, this is just a point of interest. I should really make some tea at some point so that my voice doesn't give out before the stream is over. We've barely begun, frankly. Does Riot ever give you anything for doing these analyses? Actually, good point. I should probably disclose that. Back when the Rising Tides launched, Riot gave me... they didn't give me all the cards, but they basically gave me enough wild cards and a whole bunch of coins so that I could have all of the cards unlocked to do the thing. They did that back then. Now, I've played so much Legends of Runeterra, I kind of don't need them to give me anything. I had enough wild cards to acquire every single card in the new expansion anyway. So they haven't given me anything for this one, but they did give me something for back when they launched the Bilgewater expansion, Rising Tides. Right. Anyway, Frozen Tomb, Lissandra's ultimate. again, remember what we talked about in terms of framing, in terms of how, like, the image can be composed to center one major thing in the image. So you have these lines right here, like these pillars, and this, whatever it is, like this arena, this bridge, whatever it is she's standing on. You have all these lines kind of leading you towards the center of the image, where this thing, this irregular shape in the middle, is framed by the pillars and by the rest of the imagery, and also has this grand contrast, because, like, these things are black too, right? Like, these are made clearly of obsidian or some, like, very dark material, but they are not as dark as the Frozen Tomb itself. The Frozen Tomb is, like, almost completely black in some places, whereas mostly this thing is made of grays of various kinds. So again, the contrast being used for the Frozen Tomb centers it in the image. And the tomb itself, of course, like, the shape language kind of, I think it's meant to kind of mirror the shape of Lissandra's helmet a little bit, which is interesting. It had this wedge shape, almost as though it's been driven into the ground like a spike, which I think is quite cool. And then we have the little trick with the light in the center, where you can just see the outline of Lissandra casting this thing on herself, in this case. So, Frozen Thralls. And there's something interesting happening here. The Frozen Thralls are trolls, basically, that Lissandra has acquired from Trundle, and then she's frozen them and done some Watcher shit to them, and now they are her, like, mind-controlled army of things that she's gonna use to something. But there's something interesting happening here, is that even though this Frozen Thrall is like an 8/8, like a powerful image, because this is the landmark version of the character, this is before the character is active, right? Like, this is the thing you put down on the board, and then you're gonna wait until the countdown, and then the Frozen Thralls spawn, and then you wreck shop completely. So in the Frozen Thrall Unleashed, once it's actually powerful, once it's actually doing a thing, we can see the Thrall is in the center of the image. It's like this huge, brah, I'm a troll, I'm gonna smash things. Like, this big, powerful, dangerous, like, screaming into the sky, doing Dragon Ball style, making rocks float around it, whatever, breaking free from its prison of ice to wreak destruction upon the land. But here, now it's just like a feature. Like, okay, that's clearly scary and dangerous, but it's just a feature of the landscape. It's clearly frozen in place. It's not dangerous yet. So it's just like, we have the statues in the background, we have, like, the environment of the area here, and then we have the Frozen Thralls that are there, but are not, like, the central, like, they're not characters as such, they're just features, they're just part of the landscape for the moment, anyway. Which, again, storytelling, it's quite nice. My back has been fucking with me all day. Right, back to the Frozen Thrall as a unit. Once again, you can see that there's a framing happening here. Most of the Frozen Thrall is outlined against the sky of the Howling Abyss. So you have, like, these, like, you have the structure of the place where he's being revived, which is probably Howling Abyss or the Frostguard Citadel, one of the two. But it doesn't interfere with the central character himself. You have this, like, you have this opening for him to dominate the space that isn't taken up by floating debris or by, like, architectural features. You have this blank space, essentially, for him to occupy. And then this thing. And it's a cool monster. I've already made a short video about it, about how cool of a monster design this is, but it is a cool monster design. Like, I really like the design of the Watcher. Which, if you know the lore, specifically the Watchers, like, the form that they take on Runeterra is... It's basically like they are void entities, and they come into Runeterra, and it's like, holy shit, there's laws of physics here. Fuck, that's fucked up shit. And they don't know really how to deal with laws of physics, so they sort of try to take on shapes that make sense in Runeterra, so that they can exist there and do stuff like destroy Runeterra. And the shape that the Watchers end up taking on is like this multi-limbed, sort of humanoid monstrosity thing with giant face tentacles. And it's like, and a second head on top of the head. Like, I think I think maybe the storytelling that's happening here is that this is a Watcher that's taken over Lissandra's body, and that's why there's the second head on top. It's not 100% clear, but the flavor art certainly suggests that, like, this is the end as it was foretold, as promised, sisters, forgive me. That this is a Watcher that has taken over Lissandra and is now wreaking havoc on Runeterra, and, like, you can see the Draklorn just basically fleeing from this frickin' thing because what are you supposed to do about it? But it's a cool monster design. Like, I really like the 6 arms that don't quite, like, line up or make sense. And, like, giant face tentacles and the horns. It looks like some kind of Eldritch monstrosity thing, doesn't it? Very cool. But interestingly, remember all the stuff we talked about, like, with saturation and with color contrast and, like, how to center a character in the image? Here, because the Watcher is supposed to be kind of far away and sort of hidden behind a blizzard, we don't really get... It's not really color contrasted the same way that a lot of other characters are. It's this looming thing in the background, almost, with, again, humans for scale, to sort of clarify exactly the size of this thing, and, like, how to feel about it, which is that it's huge, and it's breaking things, and oh boy, this is some Elder God nonsense, we're all fucked. Anyway, so Renekton and Nasus sort of have a bit of joint storytelling in their card art, which is that Renekton here is clearly assaulting, like, a temple or something, and we have Nasus in the background here walking out to confront him. So here we see things from Renekton's perspective, which is just his raiders murdering everything, and here we see things from Nasus's perspective as he's walking out into this battle scene to confront his brother, finally. So they have some joint storytelling going on between their cards, and certainly between their level up animations as well. But yeah, this is a pretty basic one. Renekton is in the center of the image. You can see he's highlighted with light. He's saturated with color. He has much more color contrast. Everything else is sort of desaturated and de-emphasized. There's lots of chaos going on around him, but none of that chaos overlaps him. He's the central character of the image simply by virtue of being the only thing that's really in focus, and the only thing that isn't being, like, there's no things flying past him, no debris, no nothing. He stands as this, like, unmovable rock, this pillar of strength at the center of the image, which makes him the central character. And I see the furries in chat thirsting over them already, which is entirely valid. Then we have the level up version of the character, which is a little bit of a different thing, because this seems to actually happen earlier in the storytelling. Like, this seemed to be Renekton in the full swing of attacking Nasus and his followers and stuff. But this is Renekton who seems to be calling the attack. Like, this seems to be them going on the assault and doing the thing. Like, ordering his followers to charge, something along those lines. But still, the same principles apply. He's the only thing in the image that's fully saturated. He's the only thing that's like has a proper color contrast. And he's also the only thing that's fully in focus, which is what makes him the central character of the image. So, we see some characters from around Renekton's followers. In the background here, we have the Angry Marauder guy, the same guy we saw in the Shrima cinematic, by the way. We have the Callous Bone Crusher, or something along those lines, hanging out in the background. We have a Raz Bloodmane probably riding his giant crocodile creatures somewhere in the background there. So I have, like, Renekton with all of his followers, the height of his powers. Sorta. Kinda. And then we have the level 3 art, which is where Renekton and Nasus are using their ultimates, basically, to grow to their maximum size and power. And each of those has their own storytelling. With here, it's like Renekton kicking Nasus's ass, but then in Nasus's similar, let's see, level 3 art, it's Nasus kicking Renekton's ass. So it's like it's this back and forth in their fight with one another, with the sun disk covering in the background, so they're not that far away from Azir when they're fighting. But again, framing. So there's two things that makes Renekton the main character of this image. But the main thing is just that he's bigger in the picture. Like, he takes up more space than Azir, and he has a more dynamic posture. Like Nasus rather. Nasus, he's got him by the throat, and he's unbalancing him, throwing him down, clearly pushing him over, and that makes him dominant in the body language of the image. It's like he's clearly got control of the situation, which is what makes him the main character of the picture itself. Again, we have itty bitty tiny little humans for scale. It's just two LeBlancs fighting each other. Yeah. That's true, Nicholas. Itty-bitty tiny little humans for scale to sort of sell the grandeur of this massive Clash of the Titans kind of battle. With the Ascended really get to show off just how powerful they can be when they're fully charged with their abilities. It's really nice art, too, by the way. Like, I like that, like, you can see the power of Renekton kind of peeking up through his scales on his back, as though he's, like, filled with fire inside, which I think is a very clever way to do that.